Thank you very much for the kind introduction. You may have noticed that something has changed here in the title on that presentation. One thing of that is it's a different title than 2 years ago and 4 years ago. The last times I was talking about the development of European standards, and now it's a bit about sharing the expertise or sharing experiences, sharing state of the art of a very specific type of testing of bituminous binders in Germany. I'll come back to that in these 15 minutes. But the other thing that changed on that slide is I'm now working for Eurobitume Deutschland, Eurobitume in Germany. Well, women are usually used to change their name every now and then in their lives. I never did that, so did the company I'm working for. All that's changed is the name. What we're doing, how we are focusing, what we are standing for didn't change at all. So don't be afraid about that and don't be worried about that. Next thing, before really starting with this presentation, is I need to disappoint those of you who are expecting a scientific presentation, a scientific paper here. That's not my intention. That's not what I'm going to do. There are colleagues here and some of them presenting a little bit later on, which are very much experienced in the research and science background of all of this. My focus is about the application and the practical uses. And I focus on the dynamic Shear-Rheometer and the testing with that because we do have, well, even not only on a research level, but we do have more than 20 years of experience. These equipments, it's an equipment, is used in Germany for more than 20 years, and now we are in a phase where it comes to specifications calling for test procedures or for characteristics determined with this. Whether you are really testing something, then you need to be experienced, you need to be familiar with the test equipment, but even those of you who don't test at all need to be familiar with what's behind there, because you will be those who need to interpret the results in the end. Let me start with a question. Whom of you, and now this is a little bit about physical activity, please raise your hands if you ever heard about softening point, ring and ball. Who heard about softening point, ring and ball? You may raise your hand. Okay, softening point, ring and ball is more than 100 years old. Softening point, ring and ball is these days used to determine or to address the properties, characteristics of bituminous binders at elevated surface temperatures. Softening point ring and ball was developed on paving grade, straight run, non-modified bituminous binders. And a lot of research has been done to address the how well this one parameter correlates with asphalt characteristics. Lots of research is available. And times are changing. Oh, how do I get to the, let me try this one now. Oh, here we are. I don't go to use the mouse. A little bit of background why we are so very much interested into the dynamic Shear-Rheometer, or why it's used in Germany at all. As Monica said, I was working at the Technical University of Braunschweig. Lucky me. I left the university 21 years ago. I finished my diploma 25 years ago. It's so long ago. In those days, when I was working as a researcher at the institute, so something like 1994, 1995, so long ago, we had the first dynamic Shear-Rheometer in our university, in our laboratory. When I moved to the bitumen industry in 1996, that was the time when research projects were carried out, and now, again, I'm focusing on my experiences in Germany. I'm not going to say nothing was done anywhere else, it was, but this focus is on Germany because that's a country I know pretty well. So when I moved to the bitumen industry, talks were about SHARP, Strategic Highway Research Project or Program in the USA. There was lots of reports going on mid-1990s about what's been done there, and one of the test methods or test equipments, to be very precise, that was discussed again and again and again was DSR. Everybody was saying, so how do you want to address the elevated surface temperature? How do you want to better address the elevated surface temperature properties of bituminous binders, especially when they are modified, but with softening point ring and ball? And the answer was DSR. DSR is an equipment. If you ask somebody, how can I get to Bled, and they tell you by car, that doesn't help you to find the right road. And the same applies to a dynamic Shear-Rheometer. It's an equipment. It's a measurement device. The way how you use it is depending on what you want to get as information. And that's what I want to run through quickly in this presentation on how we apply this, how we use this apparatus in Germany these days. There was also carried out by the bitumen industry a test program at the late 1990s, which was published about, and that's been in the context of the European standardization. Now, here's one of my favorite topics again, European standardization. 20 years ago, we were about to have the very first harmonized European product standards on paving grade bitumen. EN 12591 is nearly 20 years old now. It's been revised, of course, but it was published in 1999, and that is 18 years ago. And in those days also, work was going on the specification of polymer modified bitumen. Now, what you can see on this slide is a graph about the past 21 years in Germany, and as John correctly said, even we found a strong decrease in the use of asphalt, in the application of asphalt in investments. Some 7 or 8 years ago, we were in a situation where less asphalt was used in Germany than before the reunification, than before 1989. So we have a larger area now, but less investment in road infrastructure. That shouldn't be normal, huh? However, in Germany, we experienced, and this is only showing from 1995, that polymer modified bitumen, ready-to-use bitumen, are taking over more and more shares in the production of asphalt mixtures. We are definitely above 20% for years already. In the past, let's say 10 years, we were around 25%. We are somewhere between 25 to 30% of bituminous binders used in asphalt application in Germany is polymer modified bitumen. And modified bitumen is different from a non-modified bitumen. And some of the experiences we have in testing don't apply to these bitumen anymore. You can test polymer modified bitumen with the softening point ring and ball method, but the interpretation of the result is different than for a non-modified bitumen. And one needs to know that. But if we all want to address the performance of bituminous binders, the performance or the contribution to the performance of a road, then we need to be sure what we are looking at, and we need to find the right tools to come to these characteristics, to find that out, to get these answers. Now, dynamic Shear-Rheometer, as I said, is an equipment, it's a tool, and whether it's an apparatus, and whether you apply it or not, you will very shortly all be confronted with some values which you need to know, what does that mean? Everybody knows what the softening point ring and ball means because everybody has got a picture. What does this mean? Well, in Germany, we are currently applying, and this is not about research again, it's not about scientific, it's about practical applications. We are calling on 4 different procedures using the dynamic Shear-Rheometer when it comes to the specifications for bitumen and bituminous binders in Germany. One is the standard one. So when you ask somebody, how do you better address the elevated surface temperature properties of bituminous binders, and they tell you DSR, this is usually what everybody means. There's a European standard available, EN 14770, and it's about an oscillation mode where, depending on the apparatus, either a certain deformation or a certain stress is applied in oscillation mode with a given frequency, and either at a given temperature or you're having a temperature sweep, so you're changing the temperatures, or you do have a constant temperature, but maybe you're changing the frequency with which you apply this oscillation load to the binders. And what you then find out, what you then calculate is the so-called complex shear modulus, G star, and the delta, the phase angle, that is the gap between the applied deformation or the applied load and what you then measure in there. So when everybody is saying I want to apply DSR, that's usually what they are talking about. Second procedure, we are applying in Germany, and there's a European standard available for this as well now. It's the multiple stress creep and recovery test, MSCRT. The basic principle, again, not a scientific presentation here, the basic principle is for exactly 1.00 seconds. 1.00 seconds. You apply a given load to a sample, 1.00 seconds, and then you get off the load for 9.00 seconds. So it's a load for 1 second and then 9 seconds, and that is important that it's exactly this timing, otherwise you will get different results. And this, let's call it cycle, is repeated 10 times. So I don't have, do I have a pointer? Well, doesn't matter, I'll take this one, okay? So, when you start with a new cycle, this is where there's 0, huh? To apply the new load now. So this is like teeth developing 10 times. Depending on the temperature you're using, depending on the load you're applying, you can change that, you can vary that, and what you get are so-called non-recoverable creep compliance and something about the recovery of the binder. Now, when we are talking about polymer-modified bitumen, those who are applying elastomer-modified bitumen are these days interested in the elastic recovery. Maybe this recovery piece in here can one day substitute that method, for example. But there are other ways on how to interpret and how to apply this. And I'll come back to on how we are using this in Germany in a few moments. So MSCR is like 1 second, 9 seconds, nothing. And that's repeated 10 times. We do have two only local German tests or ways how we apply DSR testing in Germany. One is the so-called equi-stiffness temperature, which is very promising when it comes to replacing softening point ring and ball ones. But I won't go that much into detail because Michael Wistuber is soon going to give a very detailed presentation on that. The advantage of this is you don't need a lot of sample, you don't need a lot of time, you have physically defined properties or conditions under which you test the bituminous binders, and it doesn't matter whether it's modified or unmodified, the same physically uniquely defined conditions apply, which is not the case, for example, for softening bind. And it's very promising to differentiate between modified, non-modified, aged, non-aged, recovered, whatsoever binders, but Michael will talk about that. Fourth application we are doing in Germany, we are also using ready-to-use viscosity modified binders. You may want to call it wax modified binders. Now, what's the difference between that and a non-wax modified binder? You want to, for example, reduce your application temperatures. And for that, you need to have some indication. What's the different behavior of a, let's call it wax modified binder, towards a non-wax modified binder? And a procedure using the DSR, this time it's not an oscillation mode, but a rotational mode to use the DSR, has been developed in Germany, and the test description is available to determine the so-called phase transition temperature. That is that point where the behavior, the rheological behavior, the viscosity of the binder changes from the normal behavior. So these are the four ways, the four procedures in which the apparatus dynamic Shear-Rheometer is used in Germany, and it's applied as well. We do have a national application document for 12591 and 14023, that is paving grade bitumens and polymer modified bitumens. And even though that's not part of the standards at the moment, since the 1990s, 2000s, on a voluntary base, we were collecting information in Germany on the G-star and phase angle of the bituminous binders, that is paving grade bitumen and polymer modified bitumen. So we do have quite some experience both with the application of the apparatus, the use of the apparatus, as well as with these typical values. And now, again, if somebody says, I'm using the DSR, I'm testing in DSR, this is what they usually mean. We now have also a specification available in Germany for wax-modified binders, and in that wax-modified binder specification, which is called EKVB, and don't ask me to translate that into English. Germans are sometimes very good in abbreviations, but not only us. So what we are calling on there is the phase transition temperature, which is pretty obvious as this is what makes the binders, or what is so special in the use of the binders. But we also do not call on a softening point ring and ball for these binders. There's no requirement on a softening point in this specification, but on the equi-stiffness temperature Michael is going to talk about a little bit later, because we are convinced that for complex binders, that is all modified binders, the interpretation currently done for the softening point ring and ball is not correct and doesn't really help to address the performance of a binder. We also have, you may have heard of that, even though we had a decrease in investments and from the Federal Ministry of Transportation, and luckily it now improved, so we now have an increase for a few years, but we had this decrease, and at the same time a project was started by the Federal Minister of Transportation, the so-called enhanced data gathering. So bituminous binders and the enhanced data gathering is only one part of that, but the asphalt industry, the authorities and the bitumen industry in Germany are applying, including the apparatus of the dynamic Shear-Rheometer, to gather information and to set up a really comprehensive database, including G-star and phase angle as that oscillation mode described in EN 14770, and for polymer modified bitumen now the MSCR test as well. A lot of money is spent in that, but one of the reasons for that is because we are anticipating what's going to come from the next generation of bitumen standards. Now, this is an information to share with you on the paving grade bitumen standards. I know that you are applying this here in Slovenia. The standard was approved by unanimity informal vote. For some administrative reasons, it won't be published in early 2018, but by latest in 2019, we're expecting this to be published, and it's going to be, and hopefully also to be cited in the official journal of the European Union. When this standard is published, it will also call on information which are determined with a dynamic Shear-Rheometer. Now let me come back to the beginning. If you don't test, if you don't work in a laboratory, but you're representing the asphalt industry or the construction industry or the authorities, in the very near future, in the next few years, months only, you will be faced with a situation where you will get information because they are in the specification on, for example, the temperature where G-star equals a certain value on the short-term aged binder. And I think it's important to take that into account and to prepare so that you can interpret that in the end, that you can use these values. DSR testing, or applying the DSR test equipment, will be part in the very, very close EN 12591, and even more for the polymer modified bitumen standard, which is currently under revision. There's a high likelihood that MSCR testing will be part of that specification, which is to be applied all over Europe. And there's a high likelihood that oscillation mode testing will be called on in the specification again. So just to finish this all up, it's not that far away and it's not that much of science, even though the background is there. But even if you're not testing, and we had the situation in Germany that because of that enhanced data gathering, the laboratories invested a lot in testing apparatus. You need to be trained, you need to be experienced to apply these. Please be prepared and please be aware that this is all coming up. as it's coming up, our 2018 E&E event in Germany, which I'm delighted to invite you to. And if you want to have more information on that, there will be some leaflets outside for you to carry with you. Registration is to open in December. And with that, thank you very much.